I see the live icon.
Yeah, me too.
So we should, because we're live, that means it's currently recording, and
Yep.
this is what will be played back for future reference. So we should introduce ourselves and explain what this is about.
Okay, I'll start. So thanks everyone for joining us in the future. This town hall is a way for us on the board to tell you what it's like to be on the board in case you are interested in running. We're going to go through questions like what are the role members of the board what are the roles of the board members and what are their responsibilities? How much time is required? What's the involvement with organizing State of the Map? What is it not? Like you might think it's so-and-so, but it's not that. And so we'll go through some of those ideas. And then we'll talk about when the elections are, who can run, and any other questions that might pop up. I'm Brian DeRocher. I joined the board after Martine left in January last year. Or was it April? I forgot. And
sometime in the middle of the year.
Yeah. And that's about it for me for now. Ian, how about you?
My name is Ian. I have been on the board for some time. I working on as a treasurer, but I've also had many other hats on the board. So I am happy to answer any questions or talk about any of the experiences I've had on the board. Yeah, I think that's about it. How about you, Seth?
I'm Seth Fitzsimmons. This is my first term on the board. Yeah, I guess I was a little bit surprised with some of the responsibilities. I know that all of us put together these kind of grand manifestos, and the reality is just a little bit more pedestrian. I think there's the opportunity to do that, but we also have a lot of just ongoing stuff like State of the Map to take care of every year that ends up taking a lot more energy than I expected. It's all really rewarding. Yeah, but it's yeah, I don't know, it's a little bit different from what I expected.
Yeah, Seth, that was a great intro. I think many of the board members feel the same, at least I do, in that, I thought it was like a typical board. It's going to be like oversight. It wouldn't be so much work, but this year it was a lot of work. And it was more hours to put in than I expected. You've been on the board for a couple of years. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good thing to bring up for sure. I think I've been on the board for 5 years at least now, and so I am probably used to it, and so it is not surprising to me.
Okay.
But that's just because it's been going on for quite a while. It is. I've never been on a different board, and so it was when I joined. I didn't really have any prior expectations, but after having experienced other people's expectations about this, I completely understand why there would be a difference of expectations. The OpenStreetMap US board prides itself on getting things done, and usually it's the board that's doing the work of getting things done.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't to say it's usually a part of, or at least the board is expected to spend a lot of time getting things done. And that is very different from an advisory board that usually just makes decisions and kind of passes on those decisions to other groups, to group that will implement those decisions or work further on them. So this coming into a board like ours where there's a momentum to get more things done from within the board can be a big step up for sure.
Yeah.
I think it might be an interesting segue to talk then about why we are trying to hire somebody so that we can change away from that and be more productive as a board and let other people do the actual work of implementing what are crazy ideas and helping the community.
Yeah, about a year ago when I joined, that was about the first thing I heard is, Brian, we've got our normal day jobs, and there's a lot of work and time involved with being on the board. So our number one concern is to hire an executive director who would be a full-time worker to do all this work and then relieve the board to like executive decisions, really. And just for background for the community, we've been working on that for a year with outside consulting from an advisor who has been coaching us and telling us what the process is like. And we kicked off that process about a month ago with a blog post telling people that we will be hiring an executive director. What are the skills needed for this position? For people to express their interest and yada, 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 yada. So we are knee deep in that. And we're aiming to have a hire, let's say summer.
Yeah, I think our initial goal was to try and make progress as quickly as possible and get something started in spring. But I think a realistic result of having somebody actually doing work would be definitely in summer. Forward to that. We've actually been thinking about this hiring process for several years, and like the ticket for this in GitHub is several years old, and that was after we talked enough to make a ticket for it. So it's really nice to be able to see the momentum finally kicking in and making progress on it.
Hey,
and
Alyssa.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Alyssa just joined. Alyssa, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? Oh, or maybe not.
No audio. Alyssa, just to let you know, we are live recording this video.
Yep. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having somebody who can help interface with the community and kind of lead.
Hello?
As a full-time job, the stuff that we've been trying to get up, trying to pull together as a board for the last few years. Hi, Alyssa. Yes, we can hear you.
Yay.
You are live on the air. We have no other guests currently, but we're recording for future
Posterity.
Okay,
So
great. Hi, posterity. Apologies for being late. I was just on another call, but I'll introduce myself when you're done.
Yeah, go for it, Alyssa. It's a good time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi all. I'm not sure how everybody else introduce themselves, but
small intros.
Okay. Yes, I have been professionally and personally working in the open space, open data, geospatial, worlds for over a decade. Probably, potentially actually much like many of you, and have had the opportunity to serve on the U.S. board with this team here for the last couple of years. I'm really excited about where open mapping is currently in terms of the size of the data that we're working with, the size of the community, how we're building tools. I think it's a really exciting time to be part of your leadership for OpenStreetMap and working with you all to build kind of like the next phase I see. I have worked less on like the technical development of OpenStreetMap, but really trying to bring people together and build roadmaps and learnings, teaching materials, help answer legal questions for OpenStreetMap. So I'm really interested in the kind of convening and community aspects of the work we do, as well as like it's the data and the community's usefulness in other contexts. And again, whether that's private or nonprofit or education, like academic, all of that is really important to me as we think about how important open mapping is to every domain. Thanks. Are we thinking about questions for ourselves?
Yeah, I wrote up a HackMD page with just some basic questions.
I have a hair in my mouth.
Well, so that talks a little bit to how we end up operating as a board. At the moment, we meet weekly and we take notes. Sometimes they're legally minutes for the nonprofit, but often they're just notes for us to refer back to in the future. Or if people aren't able to join, for example, Maggie is currently in South Africa on tour with her band and doing some mapping.
Is that true?
Yeah, no, it's totally true.
It's her band?
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah. So she's not able to join this week, for example. So the notes that we took, she'll be able to go back and look over those. It also means that future board members will be able to say, okay, we know that they were talking about hiring an executive director about a year ago. Let's look at the thought process that they went through rather than having to figure out everything new. It's as though we have no memory, but we actually do have memory. So that was the long way of giving you time to go look up those questions in the HackMD.
Thanks.
So some of the questions were, what are the responsibilities of being a board member? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Happy to dive into that for a second.
Go for it.
So I think, and imagine Ian could speak to this since he has so much depth of understanding of what's in the bylaws. I guess Brian too. But I think that each of the roles are kind of explained in the bylaws. But in practicality, a lot of the things that we're all responsible for are fluid, and so beyond a treasurer who we expect to like write the checks and be the constant point person for all things financial, what it might look like for who takes the notes in a meeting or leads the meeting or the next initiative can be fluid. And I find that to be something that's a strength of this group, is that, and the way it's been historically for me is that your role or my role in this volunteer kind of leadership is not an individual contribution, but really in balance with everybody else. And so, say for instance, like again, Maggie is, I guess, touring with her band. Her responsibilities are carried by the rest of us. And so that's been my experience actually for all the years that I've been part of the board. And I think is its strength. That said, a lot of our work to date has been, I think, what people acknowledge as like tactical in nature. We've done a lot for supporting and building the OpenStreetMap conference, like State of the Map US, as well as maybe like open questions around like, again, the local chapter partnership. Sorry, this weird background noise. You might want to mute. Cool, thanks. Just for, again, posterity. So it is very, we are doing a lot of hands-on stuff as the entire group. And part of our interest in hiring an executive director is to transition the role of the board and like to a more strategic advising space and responsibility, and that the executive director will be responsible for the more practical aspects of leading the U.S. OpenStreetMap. So she or he would be involved with the State of the Map US planning to the leadership, as represented by the board. Sorry, I guess I'm talking a lot, but hopefully that's helpful.
Cool. Okay, so we've already covered who are the current board members. People might be wondering what happened to Martijn, and why did he leave the board? Maybe one of you can answer that better than I can.
Sure. From my understanding, Martijn was not only on the OpenStreetMap US board, but also on the OpenStreetMap Foundation board, and also works at Telenav, and was doing a bunch of OpenStreetMap work there. And so he was just juggling a lot of balls in the air, especially OpenStreetMap balls. Yeah. So I think he wanted to focus on fewer things, and so he stepped down so that he could focus more on the OpenStreetMap Foundation stuff. And I completely understand that is a lot of stuff on his list, and so yeah. But it was also really nice to have you join, Brian, so that we had some fresh blood in the water. But yeah, it was very nice to have you join, Brian, and I appreciate you joining.
So I guess the lesson there for everyone else, is that you can leave the board, and I guess we have some recourse for that. How much time is spent per week as a board member? Ian, for you, it's much different because you spend a lot of time. You do a lot of work for us.
Yeah, I think it really varies quite a bit. For some reason, I probably do too much, and I probably spend. I'm also recently unemployed, so that also factors into it. But I probably spend 15 and maybe 20 hours a week on OpenStreetMap US over the last few months. But that I would say that my involvement is probably an exception. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason I'm so excited about an executive director is that that the amount of time that any individual board member is decrease, and basically the amount of all of that time that we're spending corralling State of the Map US and all that kind of stuff, we'll ask the executive director to do that. And so that will leave, make it easier for people, a more diverse set of people to join the board and participate and give their opinions and help shape the future of OpenStreetMap US.
In fact, we should mention that it was greatly appreciated that Kate was able to join us in helping to plan State of the Map.
Yep, that's a good point. Yeah, so we worked with Kate Chapman to help us balance the amount of work that it was taking to do State of the Map US. It was really nice to have her help and pull off such a good event. I think it would be really good before we move on to hear from all you guys about what kind of time you're able to put in and how that works for the board.
If I can jump in before answering that to your last point of hiring Kate for State of the Map US support and seeking an executive director, and we've also been working actually with a wider range of consultants this year. And again, I think this speaks to a certain amount of professionalization we're looking to establish within the board direction and leadership, and looking for really directed support again, and thought leadership. So we have been working more behind the scenes with consultants as well. In terms of time commitment, yeah, I'd like to just reemphasize that it does seem to vary depending on what our current responsibilities are. I think on average, and again, responsibilities is like a collective. I would say on average throughout the year, it's probably more towards 5 hours a week, potentially less. And I would say the majority of those hours kind of more get concentrated, for me at least, around the State of the Map US conference, and potentially during like these other milestones where a collective of like 1 hour meetings might happen. Our required time commitment, not required, but like what we do regularly is have an hour weekly call, and a lot of the work that we do asynchronously, we record and discuss either on Slack or GitHub. So that probably added up is at least another hour of attention and work each week.
Yeah, I would totally agree. It's about 5 hours a week. It varies week to week. During State of the Map, it was much higher. There were hundreds of emails to plow through around State of the Map. And if you want to get involved in the State of the Map committee for planning, it would be even more hours. But that being on the board does not necessarily mean you have to be on the State of the Map planning committee.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. I was really busy during that time frame so I'm a freelance developer, architect, whatever. So I was really busy at the same time, so I couldn't commit anything to that. So it was more in the range of the 2 hours a week that Alyssa was talking about during that phase. However, I'm heavily involved with the ED hire right now. So that's taking up more of that time. I don't think it's up to Ian's 15 to 20 hours, but it's a little bit higher. I think that this also segues a little bit into the background of the makeup of the board a little bit. In the past, we've had people who have been representing themselves, but who have been working for companies that have a vested interest in OpenStreetMap. So they've been able to spend work time on things. And that's been an absolute luxury, particularly for things like planning state of the map, because when you're working for a large company and you have design resources that you can tap to facilitate the project, that's really beneficial. This year, we have more people who are freelance. So Alyssa is freelance. I guess Ian is kind of freelance right now since MapZen. And then Maggie and I are both freelance as well. So it means that we're having to balance our board activities with what we're doing to keep ourselves afloat personally. And that's, I think, been one of the things that's been a really positive influence on getting consultants in to do various things. State of the Map wouldn't have been nearly as good if Kate hadn't been involved. And the prospect of having an executive director to handle a lot of these things and allow us to be able to push forward really exciting stuff is great. Yeah. Before I get too rambly, I think Alyssa wanted to say something about that as well.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to acknowledge, and even in my own journey, that while I would say the majority of the people that have been on the board have both personally and sometimes professionally had an investment, like Seth was saying, an investment in OpenStreetMap. It wasn't a universal that the companies, like the full-time employees, the companies were supporting the work and that extending resources. And so we have had some people, like some organizations that have been really generous and provided like the design experience or even the time, but that's not definitely not necessarily, and I don't think as much as we might imagine. I think that in terms of the kind of professional support that we would prefer is the ability to meet an hour during the week, during the work hours. So, and this is like our weekly meetings are usually scheduled during like a 9 to 5 Eastern time. And yeah, but I do think that there's a difference between people's time on the board and the organizations that have like generously donated other support for OpenStreetMap US like activities and needs. So that's a little bit of my own perspective.
All right, cool. Did anybody come to the board thinking or having expectations, and then when they got here, they found out it's not that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I think everyone.
Yeah. So let's go just throw out a couple examples.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, if you look back to the manifesto I wrote, I really wanted to get much more involved in connecting OpenStreetMap to government. And I haven't had the time to do that. And that's, I mean, some of that was wishful thinking on my part when I was running for the board. And some of it was also just like having my eyes opened to the fact that the board is less of a group for strategic guidance and more a set of volunteers to keep the organization running and make things happen.
Yeah, I agree.
And that stuff ends up necessarily taking first priority. So yeah, I mean, I think that all of this is hopefully not discouraging people from running. It is a very rewarding experience. Yeah, I mean, if you want to participate in OpenStreetMap and make a sincere impact, you should do it. And if you have extra time on top of that, you can make even more of an impact. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of one of those sky's the limit kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to Seth's point, I think for me, working with the board, I actually think we do a lot more work than it might seem from the outside. And so we we are interested in like continuing to build the footprint of that work. So for instance, like what Seth was saying in like the government space, but we're already doing a lot to begin with just to keep the lights on. And that has been really rewarding to be able to do that for you and the community and with each other. And I think we're looking to offer that time to what else is needed to keep the lights on for OpenStreetMap US.
Cool. Anything from you, Ian?
I think it is important to mention that we all have written really eloquent and great goals and statements, mission statements for ourselves for when we run, and I've done this too every single time. And then we realize that when we're on the board, there's just not enough time to pull all that off. Mm-hmm. And I think I think that one of the things that we kind of realized that over the last couple of years, and especially recently, and so we're trying to figure out ways to make it easier, of unbury ourselves from all the work it takes to keep the organization running and kind of keep the status quo, so that we can do bigger and better things in the future. And that's what I'm looking forward to. So that's why we worked with Kate on State of the Map US and hire an executive director. We are trying to build up the infrastructure so that OpenStreetMap US can have a greater impact. And one thing that I always I think about in the back of my mind is we could be doing a whole lot more to ask for more involvement from the OpenStreetMap US community and ask for more help from people to help us along with some of this stuff. But when I think about that, just collecting volunteers and organizing them and being the project manager, for example, for those volunteers is a job in and of itself. And so as I reflect on why we haven't done that yet, that's kind of what I think about is we're already so busy keeping track of State of the Map US and handling the small amount of things that are visible right now, that trying to engage more volunteers and keep them busy and is a whole nother job. And so anyway, that's another thing that I hope an executive director can help us with. And one of the things that I'm super excited to have happen.
We all came to the board with our own projects, or at least we had our own little projects on the side. Seth, I know you were doing hot exporting, and Ian, you were doing the newsletter, and lately I've been working on a community organizing tool. And I thought those would be, like, my expectation was that the board would take ownership of that, those like activities or projects like that, and foster them and push them along. Maybe, as Ian, you were saying, organize more volunteers to contribute to these projects. But as you said, it's the organizing of people and volunteers and efforts is a job in and of itself, and it's really hard.
Well, I think that speaks to what the types of skill sets that are beneficial for people that join the board.
Great, let's talk about those.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was, I guess is in retrospect pretty obvious, but having people with really strong project management skills to make things happen and also people who are really good at communications. We've, I think, fallen off a bit on the blog posts this year because we don't have somebody who is where that's kind of just in their innate behavior, where they just kind of pump out blog posts really easily. So yeah, I think that maybe, yeah, did any of you have particular perceptions about the types of skills that you thought the board would require that got changed? I mean, yeah, I don't know. I was going to make something up really bad, so.
Well, yeah, I would say one other thing. That, you know, it's not uncommon that during an election season, we look at the number of edits that a candidate has done and their contribution to the like kind of OpenStreetMap data set. I think that there are a lot of other, in general, there's a lot of other types of contribution to the health of OpenStreetMap US and would encourage people that are doing a range of that contribution, not just direct edits. So people that may be working on education. Like, again, this is something that Maggie is quite passionate about, or mapathons, which is something that I like to support, or have legal expertise. I feel like what is really rich about the US community is that we do have a lot of that type of contribution, and we're looking for the board to represent that. I do think that, as you're pointing out, Seth, that like project management, communication, like interest in working groups, like all of this would be really helpful in not just the technical stewardship of the OpenStreetMap, work, but also all the other aspects that are important.
Yeah, and I think that I'd summarize that as being able to enable and empower other people is probably the single most important attribute. I mean, this is, yeah, I want to echo what Alyssa was saying. That somebody has edited a lot of features in OSM means that they are absolutely dedicated to the project, but doesn't necessarily line up to the types of behaviors that need to expand the community and get OSM more broadly used and people aware of it.
Yeah, the way that I heard that was, it's not like how many edits that you have made, but if you can teach 20 people how to edit the map, then you've made a huge contribution, even if you've made very few edits yourself.
Yeah, I would echo that as well, that being a part of the map, being a part of the OpenStreetMap community takes many different forms. And to be a leader on the OpenStreetMap US board means that you should be excited about the map, about the community, about the people that are in the community, and be dedicated to expanding it. There's a lot of different attributes that somebody who would want to be on the board might have, but I think that being excited about the map and editing is one indicator of that, but not the only one. I think that being excited about OpenStreetMap, the project, is one of the more important parts.
And being an enabler.
And then also, right, yeah, being an enabler and conveying that excitement to others, getting them excited about it, and getting the community excited about it. I think that's what's the most important part.
Cool.
But
all right.
On the other hand, so I should also mention that there's also plenty of room for people who are not like who don't feel that they are very outgoing or very like who feel like they have a hard time connecting with
Mhm.
community. Because that's kind of how I felt when I first joined the board. I felt like I was kind of digging around in the technology part of OpenStreetMap, and having people who are like that, who enjoy working with OpenStreetMap, I think that's the most important part. Being excited about the project comes in many different forms. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's in your face with a lot of people about it. It helps.
Yes, I totally agree with all of what you just said, Ian. Want to echo that?
All right. For the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about a few of the more boring topics, like how we typically do our work with Hangouts or GitHub or HackMD. And then after that, we'll transition over to the upcoming election and some of the how is the current election going to run, and how is it going to be different from last year. All right. So about how we typically do day-to-day work. We're on Slack every day. We have our own chat rooms, and we do most of our communication through there. We also have, as Alyssa pointed out, weekly meetings, typically, well, always in the 9 to 5 range, and that's a Google Hangout. There's always good note-taking during these meetings, so the way that we take notes is through a project or product called, what is it called? HackMD. It's really nice. It's a collaborative editor. We could all take notes at the same time. And then we archive those notes in our repository on GitHub. And that's some of the more boring technical aspects of what it's like to be on the board. Does anybody have anything to add?
I think it's good to point out that we use Google Hangouts, but that's only because that's what we're used to, and it has worked so far. Yeah, so in addition to GitHub, we also use Google Apps for email and Google Groups for things like the board email, board at openstreetmap.us email. And let's see. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
And we use GitHub to build our website.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, good.
I was going to just touch on that GitHub. We use GitHub issues as kind of a ticketing and like a task management thing. That's sometimes not obvious to folks who are new. But basically, we use GitHub tickets, GitHub issues to keep track of the back and forth for particular decisions. So for example, we are updating our insurance right now, and we have a ticket going back and forth between all of us talking about the different kinds of insurance that we want to get and how much it costs. And so as we interact with people outside of the board, conversation is going in this GitHub ticket. And so the point being that in the future, any other decisions about this can be looked on as kind of a historical record for what was going on in our brains back then, in addition to the notes and everything that will also be in GitHub.
The thing that I wanted to call out was that this year we have our board meetings Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, and depending on the time zone distribution and job situation of the next board, that's very possible for changing. At the beginning of this year, Maggie was spending a bunch of time in Africa, and I'm on the West Coast. So we needed to find something that would work for her and for me. And she actually called in from campgrounds at various points, which I guess is kind of a testament to the internet and Hangouts, and also the ability to call her phone if need be. But yeah, so I think that if people have constraints around that, I mean, everybody on the board is willing and encouraged and encouraging to work around that and to find times that actually work for everybody. That's one of the reasons that while this town hall is happening during work hours in the US, the second town hall has two components. One is going to be on a Friday, I think about the same time,
Yep.
but we're also going to do it on a Saturday. Is that correct? Or is
No,
it
Tuesday.
Okay, it's a Tuesday evening.
Tuesday evening, right.
So I just wanted to highlight that it was evening for people who are unable to join a Hangout on air during what would ordinarily be their workday. Yeah, so it's don't let that be a deciding factor about whether you can be involved. You can be involved.
All right, let's talk about the upcoming election. So we are obviously having our first town hall to describe what it's like to be on the board. And we were just talking about two upcoming town halls. These are for potential or candidates who would like to run in the election. And it's a place for them to describe who they are and their own aspirations. It's kind of an open discussion. It's not an interview. We don't have pre-canned questions. We're just going to talk. It's very casual. So if you're thinking about running, feel free to join us at one of those two upcoming town halls. They're also going to be recorded so that people who can't watch the call live will be able to watch it at their leisure. All right, so those are the two upcoming town halls, and then we'd like to mention that you need to be a registered member of OpenStreetMap US to be a voting member in order to vote. We set a deadline for that too. I think it's printed on the blog post about the election. In fact, I need to pull it up for reference. It's got a lot of good dates on it. So the second town hall will be January 27th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. The third town hall will be on Tuesday, January 30th, 6 p.m. Pacific time and 9 p.m. Eastern. And then nominations will close on February 1st. And we should mention that people should put their nominations into the wiki page. We have a wiki page about the election. Now, there might be some confusion about which wiki page you should be editing. It is nominally the 2017 election, even though it's currently 2018. So look for the 2017 US election page. Officially, elections will run from February 4th through February 11th. And here's the exciting news. Thanks to popular support or demand from our constituency, we are changing the way we do elections. We're going to be using ranked choice voting. So this basically means that among all the candidates, when you vote, you put them in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yada, yada, yada. And then there's an algorithm to determine who the winner is. Technically speaking, we're going to be using a tool called OpaVote, which we've heard good things about from the OpenStreetMap Foundation. And is there anything else that I'm missing about that? Let's see. Just that if you would like to renew or join the membership, you should go to https://join.openstreetmap.us. And you should be in good standing by February 3rd in order to vote. Okay. So those are the technical details about the election. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to add? Nope.
I think it would be helpful to point out that if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns or thoughts about running for the board or anything about OpenStreetMap US, you can email us directly at board@openstreetmap.us, or you can hop on our Slack. There's a link in the on our blog post. But all of us, and including anybody who's previously on the board, would be happy to talk with anybody who's interested in running for the board. So feel free to reach out if anything comes up. Anything about this at all? If you have any questions, please ask.
On Slack, we have a chat room dedicated for interacting with the board. It's called board-forum. So you can find us there.
And one more quick comment, and this is for the elections, but OAs. And so if there's ever a question, these are resources for people.
Exactly. All right. I'll just call it right here. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.